International schools are inherently diverse learning communities, but they're not automatically inclusive or equitable. In this session, we'll talk about how to incorporate explicit structures in your school and in your classrooms to foster inclusion, promote equity, and repair harm with one of the most widely used school climate initiatives in the world, restorative practices. Hi, I'm Mooiman. I'm so glad to be part of the ECIS conference. I moved to the Netherlands 2 years ago from the US, where I was a school social worker turned district administrator for over 20 years. In my most recent position, I was a director in a large school district of 18,000 students, and I was responsible for student well-being programs as well as implementing restorative practices and positive behavior interventions and supports, or PBIS. Now I'm an educational consultant and a registered qualified trainer for the European Forum for Restorative Justice. I work with schools around the world to improve culture and climate, reduce student discipline issues, and create safe, positive, restorative schools. In this session, we'll be talking about how we can use restorative practices to cultivate belonging and inclusion, to ensure equity, and to repair harm in our international school contexts. We're committed to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, and restorative practices is a tool to support the social and cultural rights of every child, regardless of their race, religion, or abilities. We'll start with an introduction to restorative practices and the research behind why it works. And we'll talk about how restorative practices addresses diversity, equity, and inclusion in schools. Then we'll talk about how the proactive components of restorative practices will help you create the just, equitable learning environments that you want. Finally, we'll talk about the responsive components of restorative practices, which focus on repairing harm and conflict. So what are restorative practices? Imagine a community sitting around a fire or a tree to talk about what happened, who was impacted, and how to make it right. Using circles for meeting and discussing issues has evolved in nearly every culture, and we acknowledge with gratitude and respect the indigenous roots of restorative practices. In schools, restorative practices provide an alternative framework for thinking about discipline problems, and it's much more effective than the traditional discipline practices that we use today. Restorative practices are a set of skills to develop community and to manage conflict by repairing harm and restoring relationships. They're really just structured conversations, and they fall on a continuum ranging from low-intensity, less planning, classroom-based strategies, all the way to higher intensity, more structured, office-managed strategies. Those of you that are familiar with multi-tiered system of supports, or MTSS, I find it helpful to integrate the restorative strategies into each tier so that these practices become part of the universal, targeted, and intensive interventions at your schools. By incorporating restorative practices into your MTSS framework, it's going to be a much more sustainable initiative. So why are restorative practices important? Why do they work? The primary research base for restorative practices is found in social bonding and the neurobiological components of creating trusting relationships. All of us are hardwired to connect with others. In the same way that we need food and shelter, people need deep and meaningful relationships. Consider Maslow's hierarchy of human needs. All day long, teachers are asked to meet the self-actualization needs of their students so that they meet their full potential, they can collaborate and be creative. Yet so many underlying needs aren't met. We must have our basic physiological needs met, like food, shelter, water, in order to learn. And we also need to have safety needs met. We need to feel physically and emotionally secure at school, where there's order and predictability. And then we have belonging needs, and here's where restorative practices comes in. Restorative practices like circles improve relationships, and relationships matter. In a review of 46 educational research studies, they found that strong teacher-student relationships were associated with higher academic engagement, improved attendance, higher grades, fewer disruptive behaviors and suspensions, lower school dropout rates, decreases in student and teacher anxiety, as well as an increase in student and teacher overall well-being. In other words, using circles in classrooms can provide more time for learning, not less. Research shows that classrooms in which teachers used restorative practices like facilitating circles, giving voice, and reintegrating students into class after misbehavior, they reported much higher rates on school climate surveys. Students who had experienced restorative practices in their classrooms had more positive feelings towards their teacher and peers, more voice and input, and an increased connectedness to their schools. They had better peer friendships, developed more social skills. They were more empathetic and more assertive. Using restorative practices was even associated with lower rates of cyberbullying. Using restorative practices also did something interesting for equity. The number of days lost to suspension declined across the school, but even more so for low income and students of color. In other words, not only did restorative practices improve school climate and relationships, but it significantly improved equity in the discipline of these schools, and it became a tool for inclusion. So how does restorative practices address diversity and improve equity and inclusion in schools? First, let me say that the diversity that is so valued and appreciated in international schools can present its own difficulties. Having such diverse languages and cultures and experiences together, it can make it really challenging to build relationships, especially for students who are moving in and out of school so regularly. When presented with the unknown, our assumptions and our biases kick in, and it creates barriers to building community. In the international school setting, community and belonging don't happen by accident. Creating classroom atmospheres that are inclusive and equitable have to be an intentional act, and leaders must share a commitment to building structures into the school day so that community and connectedness can be formed. By implementing circles in classrooms, international schools are promoting the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, that children can express their opinions and be listened to. Diversity is valued in circles because the quality of the circle is improved by hearing different perspectives, flowing from the lived experience of each participant. Circles are inherently anti-racist because they honor every person's individual story. And there's equity in a circle because no one's more important than anyone else. We take turns, listen deeply, and we don't interrupt, cultivating trust and promoting fairness. Circles also promote inclusion, validating the experiences and the needs of everyone in the community, particularly those who have been marginalized, oppressed, or harmed. Now, in schools, there are both the proactive and then the responsive components to restorative practices that work in tandem to create the equitable and inclusive school culture that we want. The proactive component of restorative practices are classroom circles, also called community circles or Socratic circles. In a circle, everyone sits where they can see each other and take turns speaking. Everyone has an opportunity to contribute, and power is shared. A circle can be as short as 10 minutes or as long as the whole class period. It really depends on the purpose of the circle, which might be building community, or maybe it's to solve a problem or conflict, or maybe it's to deliver academic instruction in a highly engaging way. In primary, most teachers find a daily circle beneficial, and for secondary, most teachers hold a circle at least weekly. I recommend having a dedicated time in the school schedule, like mentor hour or a community time, when all the classrooms are facilitating circles, teaching social emotional learning, teaching school-wide expectations, and then covering various topics like current events that don't fit in other class curricula. If you don't set aside time, it's just not going to happen. There's so many other pressures on a teacher's time. Also important to consider for secondary teachers, if you want the benefits that we've been discussing in terms of positive relationships, you're going to want to hold circles in all of your classrooms at least monthly. The truth is, while there's some guidelines to facilitating circles, there's not a single right way. Like anything new, it can feel awkward for teachers to try their first classroom circle, so I've included a circle planning worksheet in the support materials to get you started. Before holding a circle, consider your physical space. For younger students, is there an area on the carpet where they can sit in a circle and all see each other? For older students, can you easily push desks against the walls and create a circle with chairs? You could also have a circle standing, or you can go outside. When you begin to use circles in your classroom, you're going to start by establishing circle guidelines together. Setting expectations is an important part of creating a safe and respectful community. For example, students will want to know that others are going to listen to them and not make fun of them. Maybe they're going to want to be assured of confidentiality, that anything said in the group isn't going to go any further. In your support materials, I've also included a poster of these circle guidelines for you just to have a place to start. Once you've established your circle guidelines, you'll all hold each other accountable as they directly impact the success of the circle. When deciding on circle questions or prompts, you'll want to start with low-risk questions that don't require too much vulnerability. Simply asking students to share their favorite animal, or what superpower do they wish they have, or who in their life do they look up to? What would they do if they knew they couldn't fail? Students begin to share parts of themselves with their class and build connections. I'm including a list of questions for circles that you're welcome to use. It's really important for international schools to have a clear practice around welcome and goodbye circles in every classroom because they support students with closure. These circles help address the all too common struggles that international students face developing and maintaining friendships because of the transient nature of their lives. Welcome circles allow students to orient themselves to the new class in the school. You might ask students to share the answers to questions like, what does a student here need to know that isn't in the student handbook and no one will tell you? And who do you go to for support and help here at the school? During the circle, you can make a plan for the day, like which classmates will take the new student on a tour and who they're going to eat lunch with. You can also invite the new student to ask any questions that they have about how things work at the school, and then take time for the other students to answer. As you know from experience in international schools, goodbyes are just as important for those leaving as for those staying. And leaving is a process, it's not a one-time event. Goodbye circles provide closure and they allow students to move forward and to grow. Students can share answers to prompts like, I will miss you because, and your new school is lucky to have you because, and one of my favorite memories with you was when, or I will always remember you as someone who. As Doug Otis says, you have to say a clear goodbye in order to say a clear hello. As you use circles in your classroom and students follow the circle guidelines like respectfully listening to each other, holding back judgments, speaking honestly, they'll begin to trust the process. Once you've proactively created a community across the school, when issues arise, you can respond by using the restorative conversations to help you solve problems and repair harm. So let's talk about responsive components of restorative practices that we can use in our international school context. When there are incidents of harm, including things like exclusion, bias, microaggressions, or even overt acts of racism, homophobia, or sexism, we can use the restorative questions. There's two sets of questions, one for the person who did the harm and another for the person who was harmed. For the student who harmed the other person, you can ask what happened. What were they thinking and feeling at the time? Who was affected by it? And what can be done to make things right moving forward? And for the student who was harmed, we ask restorative questions too. What did they think when they realized what had happened? What impact did the incident have on them? And what's been the hardest thing? What needs to happen to make things right? When these voices have historically been marginalized, it's even more important that they be elevated and heard. Once I worked with a 5th grade teacher who had a boy in her class making racist comments to an African American student in the class. The teacher had told him to stop and reminded him of the classroom expectation that in our class we speak to each other respectfully, and using words like those to put down others is unacceptable. For most students, being reminded of the expectation in the class and being told to stop, it's sufficient. But this student continued making the comments when the teacher wasn't present. So I coached the teacher to have a restorative conversation separately with the boy who was making the comments and then with the girl who was being targeted. She met with them individually and she asked them the restorative questions and then asked if they'd be willing to meet. They agreed, and so she was able to facilitate a restorative conversation between the two students using the restorative questions. The boy apologized, and he said he'd stop, and the girl was empowered by the conversation to know that she had the teacher's support in making it stop. The comments turned out to be a lot more frequent than the teacher initially thought, so she wanted to facilitate a classroom circle to address the impact that the comments had on the entire class. I helped her prepare a circle script that began with making it clear that the situation between the students had been resolved, but now the teacher wanted to have a broader discussion about how does it feel when people make racial comments? And as a class, how do we want to treat each other moving forward? And what commitments are we willing to make next time when we have unkind behavior in our class? The students all shared how uncomfortable they felt, how they didn't know what to do to make it stop, and then they expressed a willingness to speak up next time it happened, at school or anywhere else, to make sure no one was made to feel the way that their classmate did. The class moved forward without any more incidents that year. Circles provide a shared space to hold strong emotions and uncomfortable topics safely, so that they can be used to help students share their feelings and experiences about issues like race, gender, and identity. We can ask things like, what does race mean to you? Or is gender an important part of your identity on a daily basis? Or what's the hardest thing talking about privilege? Issues like these shape our worldview, our behavior and choices, perceptions and relationships, and unfortunately, they're the sources of conflicts and misunderstandings at school. Because these types of circles need an even greater level of vulnerability, and students need to feel very safe, they really should only be attempted after the class has established trust through regular community building circles. When wrongdoing has occurred and people have been harmed, an important part of restorative practices is providing an opportunities for students who did harm to be accountable. Now, there's a difference between a traditional and a restorative approach to accountability. In traditional discipline, accountability means that the student who broke the rule is punished. In a restorative discipline framework, accountability means understanding the impact of their actions, taking responsibility for their choices, and even coming up with ways to repair the harm. But here's the thing, before a student feels sorry, they first need to understand that they've hurt someone else. The desire to make things right comes after hearing directly from the person who was hurt. And that's why we engage in restorative conversations like restorative chats, mediations, circles, and conferences. During these conversations, everyone impacted by the harm generates ideas on how to repair the harm. Recently, I facilitated a circle for a group of high school students and their teacher after a racial incident occurred on a Model UN Club field trip. Each person shared their role in the incident and how they were impacted by it. Especially powerful was when one student of color shared how she had looked to her teacher to stop the jokes and the comments, but the teacher allowed it to go on. She was left feeling isolated from her peers and a crushing disappointment in her teacher. The students expressed how it had never even occurred to him how their actions impacted the students of color, and heartfelt apologies were made. The government teacher shared the very real struggle that he had between action versus inaction, allowing free speech and political expression, while at the same time gaining a new understanding of how this type of expression could cause very real pain for some students. He realized that by remaining silent on these issues, he failed to provide a safe space for students. Together, the students made a plan to create a committee to invite more participation in the club to improve its diversity, as well as committing to increase leadership roles for students of color within other school clubs on campus. The teacher planned to initiate an ethnic studies course next year with a team of teachers, and he requested restorative practices training for the teachers so that they could actively engage students in discussions about race, oppression, and privilege. The reason we can use circles to address these potentially explosive subjects is because we don't focus on whether someone is wrong or in trouble, or whether they should or shouldn't have said or done that thing. Instead, we focus on the impact on others, and we create a space for dialogue and engagement. Now, we absolutely respect freedom of speech among our students, but we also know that with freedom of speech comes responsibility, because our words and our actions or inactions impact others. As leaders in international schools, we're committed to eliminating disparities in access and opportunity in order to provide the nurturing and the inclusive school environment that every student deserves. To that end, we really must create explicit structures like classroom circles to develop relationships, strengthen inclusion, and to build a culture of empathy and compassion in our school community. Then, when inequities or incidents of harm occur, restorative circles can provide meaningful ways to repair relationships and to heal. Thanks for attending my session. I hope that you found this session empowering and that you have practical ideas to help your school and each individual in it to flourish. I look forward to talking to you after this session. Go to my website, lauramooiman.com, and download free resources, watch free training videos, check out my online courses, and connect with me